So, you're curious about Disney's latest live-action remake of The Little Mermaid? Well, buckle up because we're diving deep into everything you need to know about this underwater adventure. Let's start from the beginning and work our way through every detail of this film that's been making waves since its release. The story kicks off in the vast ocean where we meet Ariel, a young mermaid princess who's basically the ocean's biggest rebel. She's not content with just swimming around and singing sea shanties like her sisters. Oh no, she's obsessed with the human world above the waves. The basic premise follows the classic tale we all know and love, but with some fresh twists that Disney thought would make it relevant for today's audience. Ariel lives under the sea with her father, King Triton, who rules the underwater kingdom of Atlantica with his trusty trident. The story really gets rolling when Ariel saves a human prince named Eric from drowning during a terrible storm. From that moment on, she's determined to become part of his world, even if it means making a dangerous deal with the sea witch Ursula to trade her voice for human legs. It's a tale as old as time, or should I say, as old as the sea itself. Now let's talk about who's bringing these beloved characters to life on screen. The main character, Ariel, is portrayed by Halle Bailey, and let me tell you, her casting caused quite the internet storm before the film even came out. She's joined by Jonah HauerKing, who plays Prince Eric, the dashing sailor who captures Ariel's heart. Then we've got Melissa McCarthy, stepping into the tentacles of Ursula, the villainous sea witch, who's basically the underwater equivalent of a shady used car salesman. Javier Bardem takes on the role of King Triton, Ariel's overprotective father, who just wants to keep his daughter safe, but ends up pushing her away instead. The cast also includes Awkwafina voicing Scuttle the Seagull, David Diggs as Sebastian the Crab, who's basically Ariel's unwilling babysitter, and Jacob Tremblay as Flounder, Ariel's loyal best friend. Each of these actors brings something unique to their roles, creating an ensemble that's both familiar and fresh at the same time. Halle Bailey's performance as Ariel is nothing short of spectacular, and I'm not just saying that because I'm afraid of angry Disney fans in the comments. This young actress brings a genuine wonder and determination to the character that makes you believe she really would give up everything for a chance at a different life. Her voice is absolutely stunning, which is kind of important when you're playing a character whose whole thing is having an amazing voice before giving it up. The way she expresses Ariel's curiosity about the human world through her facial expressions and body language shows real talent. She makes you care about this mermaid who's willing to risk everything for love and the chance to explore a world she's only dreamed about. Bailey manages to capture both the youthful innocence and the stubborn determination that makes Ariel such a compelling character. When she's exploring sunken ships or gazing up at the surface, you can see the longing in her eyes, and when she loses her voice, she has to convey everything through physical acting, which she pulls off beautifully. Some people had their doubts before the film came out, but Bailey proves she was absolutely the right choice for this role. Jonah HauerKing brings a different energy to Prince Eric than we saw in the animated version. Instead of being just a pretty face with a nice voice, this Eric is given more depth and backstory. He's portrayed as someone who also feels trapped by his circumstances, stuck in a castle when he'd rather be out exploring the ocean. This creates a nice parallel with Ariel's own situation, making them feel like genuine soulmates rather than just two attractive people who happen to bump into each other. HauerKing and Bailey have real chemistry together, which is crucial for selling this whole love at first sight thing that the story depends on. Their scenes together, especially the ones after Ariel loses her voice, feel genuine and sweet. Eric's not just waiting around for Ariel to kiss him. He's actively trying to figure out who this mysterious girl is and why he feels so connected to her. The expanded storyline gives Eric his own interests and personality, making him feel like an actual character, rather than just a prize for Ariel to win. Melissa McCarthy's take on Ursula is one of the most talked about aspects of this film, and for good reason. The Sea Witch is one of Disney's most iconic villains, and McCarthy had some seriously big tentacles to fill. She brings a theatrical flair to the role that's perfect for a character who's basically performing every moment of her life. McCarthy understands that Ursula is someone who loves being bad, who enjoys manipulating others and watching them squirm. Her performance is campy in all the right ways, never quite crossing the line into parody, but always dancing right up to it. When she's singing "Poor Unfortunate Souls," she commands the screen with the kind of presence that makes you understand why desperate merpeople would come to her for help, despite knowing she's probably going to screw them over. The visual effects team did an amazing job making her look like she really belongs in this underwater world, with tentacles that move and react naturally. McCarthy manages to be both funny and genuinely threatening, which is exactly what Ursula needs to be. Javier Bardem as King Triton brings a gravitas to the role that makes sense for the ruler of the entire ocean. He's not just an angry father yelling at his daughter for collecting human stuff. Bardem makes you understand that Triton's fear comes from a place of genuine love and concern. There's a history there, a reason why he's so terrified of humans that we get to explore more in this version. Bardem shows us a father who's trying his best but doesn't know how to connect with a daughter who's so different from him and her sisters. His relationship with Ariel feels real and complex, not just a simple case of rebellious teenager versus strict parent. When Triton destroys Ariel's collection of human artifacts, you can see the immediate regret on Bardem's face even as he's doing it. He knows he's gone too far, but his fear has taken over. This makes the character more sympathetic than he might have been otherwise. The eventual reconciliation between Triton and Ariel feels earned because of the foundation Bardem lays throughout the film. The supporting cast really brings the underwater world to life in ways that complement the main story. Awkwafina voices Scuttle with her trademark energy, making the scatterbrained seagull even more chaotic than in the original. Her Scuttle is the friend who gives terrible advice with complete confidence, and Awkwafina's delivery makes even the character's most ridiculous moments entertaining. Daveed Diggs brings his Hamilton-honed musical talents to Sebastian, the crab who's stuck trying to keep Ariel out of trouble, while also serving as King Triton's advisor. His version of Under the Sea is infectious and fun, making you want to dance along even if you're just sitting on your couch. Jacob Tremblay's Flounder is adorable and loyal, the kind of best friend who's always slightly nervous but will follow Ariel anywhere because that's what friends do. Even the smaller roles, like Ariel's sisters, get moments to shine, and show personality. The voice actors bring warmth and humor to their roles, creating an underwater kingdom that feels populated by actual characters rather than just background fish. The chemistry between the main actors is essential for this story to work, and thankfully, the cast delivers. Bailey and HauerKing have a natural rapport that makes you believe in their connection even when they're not saying anything to each other. Their silent courtship after Ariel loses her voice could have been awkward, but instead, it's charming and genuine. McCarthy and Bardem have a different kind of chemistry as old adversaries who share a complicated history. You can feel the tension when they're in scenes together, the weight of whatever happened between them in the past. Even the relationships between Ariel and her animal friends feel real, with Bailey interacting with the CGI creatures in ways that make you forget they're not actually there. The cast clearly understood the assignment and worked together to create a cohesive world where all these different types of characters can exist together. Now, let's dive into the actual story and how it unfolds. The film opens with a glimpse of the underwater kingdom, establishing the world where Ariel lives. We see her sisters performing for their father, being perfect little mermaids, while Ariel is off exploring a sunken ship with Flounder. Right from the start, we understand that she doesn't quite fit in with her family's expectations. She's curious about things that scare or bore everyone else. This exploration leads her to collect human artifacts, which she brings to Scuttle to get completely wrong explanations about what they are and how humans use them. It's fun and establishes Ariel's character perfectly. Meanwhile, above the waves, we meet Prince Eric, who's also feeling constrained by his royal duties. He wants to explore and have adventures, not sit in meetings about trade agreements. This parallel setup is new to this version and helps establish why these two are perfect for each other. They're both dreamers stuck in worlds that don't understand them. The inciting incident happens when Ariel sees Eric's ship from below and becomes fascinated. She follows along, watching the celebration on board, and this is where she first lays eyes on the prince. Then the storm hits, the ship is destroyed, and Eric would have drowned if Ariel hadn't pulled him to shore. She sings to him while he's unconscious, and even though he doesn't see her face, he hears her voice and becomes obsessed with finding the girl who saved him. Ariel swims away before he fully wakes up, but the damage is done. She's fallen completely in love with this human prince, and he's fallen for the mysterious girl with the beautiful voice. This sets up the central conflict because, of course, King Triton finds out about Ariel's rescue mission and is absolutely furious. The confrontation between father and daughter is intense, ending with Triton destroying all of Ariel's collected human treasures in a moment of fear-driven rage. This pushes Ariel into making a desperate decision that will change everything. Enter Ursula, who's been watching and waiting for exactly this kind of opportunity. She presents herself as Ariel's only option, offering to turn her into a human for 3 days. The catch, as we all know, is that Ariel has to give up her voice. And if she can't get Eric to kiss her before sunset on the 3rd day, she'll belong to Ursula forever. Oh, and she'll turn back into a mermaid, which would be awkward if she's not near water. Ariel, being young and in love and not thinking clearly, agrees to these terms. The transformation scene is both beautiful and slightly horrifying, as it should be. Ariel gets her legs, but loses the voice that Eric is specifically looking for. Ursula's plan is pretty clever when you think about it. She knows Eric is searching for the girl who saved him by trying to find someone with that specific voice. By taking Ariel's voice, she's ensuring that Eric won't recognize her, making it nearly impossible for Ariel to succeed. But our girl Ariel is determined, and she's not going to let a little thing like being unable to speak stop her from pursuing her dreams. Ariel's time in the human world is both wonderful and frustrating for her. On one hand, she's finally where she's always wanted to be, experiencing all the things she's only imagined, walking, dancing, eating with a fork the correct way instead of using it as a comb like Scuttle suggested. On the other hand, she can't tell Eric that she's the one who saved him. She has to hope that he'll somehow recognize her without the voice that he's been dreaming about. Eric, for his part, is drawn to Ariel in ways he can't quite explain. There's something familiar about her, something that makes him feel connected, even though she's not the singing girl from the beach. The film takes time to develop their relationship, showing them learning about each other through actions rather than words. They go on adventures around the kingdom, with Ariel experiencing everything with such joy and wonder that Eric can't help but be charmed. These scenes are genuinely sweet and help sell the romance that the entire plot depends on. Sebastian and Flounder, meanwhile, are doing their best to help Ariel while also freaking out about the whole situation. Sebastian especially is torn between his loyalty to King Triton and his affection for Ariel. He knows he should tell the king what's happened, but he also wants to help Ariel achieve her happiness. The Kiss the Girl scene is a highlight, with Sebastian orchestrating a romantic evening to try and get Eric to make a move before time runs out. It's magical and romantic, with beautiful lighting and music, and they almost kiss. Almost. But it doesn't happen, and the clock keeps ticking toward Ariel's deadline. The tension builds as we get closer to sunset on the third day, with Ariel becoming more desperate and Eric remaining oblivious to the urgency of the situation. He cares about her, maybe even loves her, but he's still hung up on finding the mystery girl from the beach, not realizing they're the same person. Just when it seems like maybe, possibly, Eric might figure things out and kiss Ariel in time, Ursula decides to take matters into her own tentacles. She transforms herself into a beautiful human woman named Vanessa, using Ariel's voice to enchant Eric. This is where the plot really kicks into high gear. Eric, hearing that voice he's been searching for, becomes completely entranced by Vanessa and announces they're getting married immediately. Ariel is heartbroken, watching the man she loves fall for someone else while wearing her voice. It's genuinely painful to watch, even though we all know this is Ursula's doing. The wedding is rushed, planned for sunset on the third day, which is, of course, no coincidence. If Ariel can't stop this wedding and get that kiss, she's done for. Scuttle discovers Vanessa's true identity by seeing Ursula's reflection in a mirror, and all of Ariel's friends rally together to sabotage the wedding. It's chaotic and fun, with birds and sea creatures attacking the ceremony while everyone tries to figure out what's happening. During the chaos, Scuttle manages to break the shell necklace that holds Ariel's voice, and it returns to her, just as the sun is setting. Eric finally realizes that Ariel was the girl who saved him all along, and they try to kiss, but the sun sets before their lips meet. Ariel transforms back into a mermaid and according to their deal, her soul now belongs to Ursula. The sea witch reveals herself, growing to an enormous size and dragging Ariel back into the ocean. King Triton shows up, ready to fight for his daughter, but Ursula has the contract on her side. In a moment of true parental love, Triton offers to take Ariel's place, sacrificing himself to save his daughter. Ursula accepts this trade because Triton's soul is worth way more than Ariel's. She gets his crown and trident, transforming into a massive, powerful monster who starts wreaking havoc on both the ocean and the surface world. Everything looks pretty hopeless at this point, with the villain winning and our heroes seemingly defeated. But Eric, being the adventurous prince he is, isn't about to let the woman he loves be destroyed by a power-mad sea witch. He gets on a ship and joins the battle, which is raging across the ocean. Ariel is fighting too, using everything she's learned about both worlds to combat Ursula. The final battle is spectacular, with massive waves, lightning, and Ursula controlling the ocean itself to attack. There are moments where it genuinely looks like she might win, that her plan for oceanic domination might actually succeed. The climax comes when Eric manages to steer a ship's broken mast directly into Ursula, defeating her in a moment that's both triumphant and slightly gruesome for a Disney movie. With Ursula gone, her magic breaks, and all the poor souls she's collected over the years are freed, including King Triton. He gets his trident and crown back, and more importantly, he gets his daughter back safe and sound. Here's where this version does something interesting compared to the animated original. Instead of Triton just immediately turning Ariel human because she's sad, there's an actual conversation between father and daughter. Triton has seen what Ariel accomplished in the human world, how happy she was, and how bravely she fought. He's also seen Eric risk his life to save her, proving that not all humans are dangerous. More than that, he's realized that trying to keep Ariel in his world when her heart belongs somewhere else isn't protecting her. It's just making them both miserable. So when he transforms her into a human permanently, it's not just about giving her what she wants. It's about acknowledging that she's grown up and has to make her own choices, even if those choices take her far away from him. It's a bittersweet moment because Triton is losing his daughter, but he's doing it out of love rather than defeat. The look they share before Ariel goes to the surface is beautiful and emotional, a proper goodbye between a father and daughter who finally understand each other. The ending shows Ariel and Eric together, combining their two worlds in a way that suggests she won't just abandon her family and heritage. There's a sense that bridges are being built between the ocean and the land, that maybe these two kingdoms don't have to be separate after all. It's a hopeful conclusion that fits with the film's themes about breaking down barriers and following your dreams without completely abandoning where you came from. Ariel gets to be human and be with Eric, but she's not cutting ties with her father and sisters. It's a more mature ending than just they lived happily ever after, suggesting that Ariel will navigate both worlds and help them understand each other better. Some people might find it too neat and tidy, but for a Disney movie, it works. The final shots of Ariel in her wedding dress, looking happy and confident, remind us why this story has endured for so long. It's about finding where you belong and being brave enough to pursue it. Now let's talk about who brought this underwater epic to life behind the scenes. The director of this version is Rob Marshall, who has experience with both musicals and Disney adaptation. He previously directed Chicago, which won the Academy Award for Best Picture, and Disney's Mary Poppins Returns. So he knows his way around a musical number and working with the Mouse House. Marshall brings a theatrical sensibility to the film that works well with the story's fairy tale elements. He understands how to stage the big musical numbers so they feel grand and exciting while also serving the story and characters. His experience with both live action and heavy visual effects comes in handy when you're trying to make underwater scenes look realistic while also being magical and fantastical. Marshall clearly has affection for the source material, but isn't afraid to make changes where he thinks they'll improve the story for a modern audience. The screenplay was written by David Magee, who's known for his work on films like Life of Pi and Finding Neverland. Magee had the challenging task of taking the beloved animated film and expanding it to work as a live-action movie with a longer runtime. He added more backstory for characters like Eric and gave more context to the relationship between Triton and Ursula. Some of the changes work better than others, but overall, the script respects the original while trying to address some criticisms people have had about the story over the years. For instance, Eric is given much more personality and agency in this version. He's not just a prize to be won. He's a character with his own dreams and conflicts. The script also tries to give Ariel more motivation beyond just wanting a boyfriend, emphasizing her curiosity about the human world as equally important to her love for Eric. Whether these changes are successful is debatable, but you can see what they were trying to do. This version of The Little Mermaid was made exclusively for theatrical release by Walt Disney Pictures, which might seem obvious but is worth noting. In recent years, Disney has sent some of their releases straight to Disney Plus, or given them simultaneous releases in theaters and on streaming. The Little Mermaid got a full theatrical rollout, showing that Disney had confidence in it as a major blockbuster. After its theatrical run, it became available on Disney Plus, which is where many people probably ended up watching it. The decision to give it a proper theatrical release makes sense given the film's massive budget and the spectacle of the underwater scenes, which really benefit from being seen on a big screen with a good sound system. The underwater visuals and musical numbers were designed to be impressive, and they definitely make more of an impact in a theater than they do on a TV screen. The story is, of course, based on Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tale, The Little Mermaid. But more directly, it's a remake of Disney's 1989 animated classic. The original Disney film is considered one of the movies that kicked off the Disney Renaissance, a period of huge success for their animation department. It introduced a generation to Ariel's story and featured iconic songs by Alan Menken and Howard Ashman. This 2023 version keeps most of the beloved songs from the original while adding a few new ones, also by Menken, but with lyrics by Lin-Manuel Miranda, since Ashman sadly passed away in 1991. The decision to remake this particular film was both obvious and risky. Obvious because it's one of Disney's most popular animated features with built-in nostalgia and name recognition. Risky because people are very attached to the original and any changes would inevitably upset some fans. Disney has been on a remake kick for years now, turning animated classics into live-action films with mixed results, so this was continuing that trend. The producers on this film include some heavy hitters in the industry. Rob Marshall himself is a producer, along with John DeLuca and Mark Platt. Platt is particularly notable for producing successful musicals like La La Land and Wicked on stage. Lin-Manuel Miranda, who wrote the new songs, also served as a producer, bringing his musical theater expertise to the project. These producers had the task of overseeing a massive production that required cutting-edge visual effects, extensive underwater filming techniques, and coordinating a large cast and crew. They also had to deal with the pressure of remaking a beloved classic and all the expectations and criticisms that come with that. The production budget was reportedly around $250 million, making it one of the most expensive films ever made. So the stakes were incredibly high for everyone involved. The producers had to balance staying faithful to the original while also justifying the existence of a new version. The inspiration for creating this remake came from multiple sources. On a business level, Disney's strategy of remaking their animated classics in live action has been incredibly profitable. Films like Beauty and the Beast, The Lion King, and Aladdin made tons of money, so continuing that trend with another beloved property made financial sense. On a creative level, the filmmakers talked about wanting to introduce Ariel's story to a new generation and taking advantage of modern technology to create underwater worlds that weren't possible in live action before. Rob Marshall mentioned being inspired by the challenge of bringing this fantastical underwater kingdom to life in a realistic way while maintaining the magic and wonder of the animated film. There was also a desire to expand the story and give more depth to characters who were somewhat one-dimensional in the original. The casting of Halle Bailey as Ariel was inspired by her incredible voice and the opportunity to show young black girls that they could be Disney princesses too, which sparked important conversations about representation in these classic stories. The making of this film was a massive undertaking that took years from development to release. Pre-production involved extensive planning for how to actually film scenes that take place underwater without putting actors in water tanks for months. The solution involved a lot of green screen work and innovative rigs that could move actors in ways that mimicked floating and swimming. The production team studied how hair and fabric move underwater to replicate those physics digitally. They also had to figure out how to make the underwater scenes feel different from the land scenes in terms of lighting, color, and movement. Filming took place in various locations, including Sardinia, Italy, for some of the coastal scenes featuring Eric's kingdom. The underwater kingdom of Atlantica was entirely created through CGI, with actors performing in front of blue or green screens. The visual effects team spent countless hours rendering the ocean environments, the sea creatures, and making everything look cohesive. Post-production was extensive, with the CGI work alone taking many months to complete. The musical numbers required particular attention, since they needed to be spectacular enough to justify their existence in the remake while also honoring the beloved original versions. Beyond Halle Bailey, Jonah, HauerKing, and Melissa McCarthy, the cast includes several other talented performers. Javier Bardem brings his Oscar-winning gravitas to King Triton, as we mentioned earlier. Art Malik plays Eric's advisor, Grimsby, who's kind of like a father figure to the prince. Grimsby is more involved in this version, getting some nice moments that show his genuine care for Eric. Noma Dumezweni plays Queen Selena, Eric's adoptive mother, which is a change from the original where his parents weren't really present. This addition gives Eric more backstory and explains some of his conflicts about duty versus adventure. Then there are Ariel's sisters, played by various actresses who each get little moments to show their distinct personalities, though honestly, the film could have done more with them. Lorena Andrea plays Perla, Simone Ashley plays Indira, Carolina Conche plays Mala, Sienna King plays Tamika, Natalie Sorrell plays Caspia, and Kaisa Mohammed plays Karina. They each bring something to the ensemble, even if they don't get as much screen time as fans might have wanted. The voice cast for the CGI characters is equally impressive. Daveed Diggs brings his signature energy to Sebastian, the Jamaican-accented crab who serves as Triton's advisor and Ariel's reluctant chaperone. Diggs is best known for his dual role in Hamilton, and he brings that same musical talent to Sebastian's numbers. Jacob Tremblay, the young actor who broke hearts in Room and made us laugh in Good Boys, voices Flounder with just the right amount of nervous energy and loyal friendship. Awkwafina takes on Scuttle, and while some people found her voice annoying, that's kind of the point with this character. Scuttle is supposed to be an eccentric know-it-all who actually doesn't know anything, and Awkwafina plays that perfectly. There are also various other voice actors bringing life to the sea creatures that populate Atlantica, creating a rich underwater world that feels lived in. Each voice actor had to perform, while the visual effects team later created the characters around their performances, which requires a special kind of skill and imagination. The actors across the board take their roles seriously, which is essential when you're asking audiences to believe in singing crabs and sea witches. Halle Bailey commits fully to Ariel's wide-eyed wonder and determination, never winking at the camera or treating the material as beneath her. She plays every moment sincerely, which helps sell the more fantastical elements of the story. Jonah HauerKing matches her sincerity, playing Eric as a genuine romantic rather than just a Disney prince stereotype. Melissa McCarthy clearly has a blast as Ursula, but she never lets the performance become pure camp. There's real menace underneath the theatricality, which makes Ursula feel like a legitimate threat. Javier Bardem brings emotional weight to Triton, making the character's journey from overprotective father to understanding parent feel real and earned. Even the voice actors, who are just recording in sound booths, bring full performances that give the animators something to work with. The commitment level across the entire cast helps overcome some of the inherent silliness of the premise. The chemistry among the cast members helps create believable relationships that ground the fantastical story. Bailey and HauerKing spent time together before filming to build their connection, and it shows in their scenes. They have a natural ease with each other that makes you believe Ariel and Eric would fall in love over the course of just 3 days. The courtship scenes, especially the ones where Ariel can't speak, rely entirely on their chemistry and physical acting, and both actors deliver. Bailey also has great chemistry with the actors and voice performers playing her friends. Her interactions with the CGI Sebastian and Flounder feel genuine because she's really reacting and connecting with the performers, even though the characters are added later. Bardem and Bailey create a believable father-daughter dynamic, with their scenes together carrying real emotional weight. Even McCarthy, who's basically performing solo for most of her scenes since Ursula's minions are CGI, creates compelling dynamics through her performance alone. The cast clearly trusted each other and the material, which helps the audience trust the story they're telling. The actors who voice Sebastian, Flounder, and Scuttle bring distinct personalities to Ariel's group of helpers and friends. Daveed Diggs gives Sebastian a warmth and humor that makes the crab more than just comic relief. His Sebastian is stressed about keeping Ariel safe, but also genuinely cares about her happiness, creating a nice tension in the character. The way Diggs delivers Sebastian's lines makes even the character's most exasperated moments endearing. Jacob Tremblay's Flounder is less of a comic character and more of a genuine best friend, with Tremblay playing up the loyalty and courage that Flounder shows despite being scared most of the time. Awkwafina's Scuttle is the most purely comedic of the three, with the actress leaning into the character's absurdity while also making Scuttle's friendship with Ariel feel real. These three characters could easily have been annoying sidekicks, but the voice actors give them enough personality and heart that they enhance, rather than distract from the main story. Their chemistry with Halle Bailey, even though they're rarely in the same physical space during the filming, creates a believable friend group. Now let's examine how the story unfolds and where it takes some interesting turns. One of the major changes in this version is the expansion of Prince Eric's character and backstory. In the animated film, Eric was pretty much just a handsome prince who liked sailing. Here, he's given actual depth and internal conflict. We learn that he's adopted, found as a baby after a shipwreck, and raised by Queen Selena. This backstory explains his obsession with the ocean and exploration. He feels like he doesn't quite belong in the royal life, similar to how Ariel doesn't fit in under the sea. Eric is resistant to his mother's efforts to find him a suitable princess to marry because he's more interested in discovering new lands and cultures. This makes him more relatable and creates a better parallel with Ariel's situation. They're both trapped by their circumstances and longing for something different. When they meet, they recognize in each other a kindred spirit, someone who understands that restless feeling. This added dimension makes their love story feel less like simple infatuation and more like two people who genuinely understand each other. The relationship between Ariel and her father gets more exploration in this version as well. We learn that King Triton's hatred of humans isn't just random prejudice. There's a tragic backstory involving Ariel's mother that explains his fear and overprotectiveness. While the film doesn't dwell on this too much, it adds context to Triton's actions. He's not just being an unreasonable tyrant. He's a father who's already lost someone he loved to the human world and is terrified of losing his daughter too. This makes the scene where he destroys Ariel's collection more tragic because we understand he's acting out of trauma and fear rather than mere anger. The film takes time to show Triton's perspective, letting us see how he struggles with wanting to protect Ariel while also recognizing that she's different from her sisters and needs different things. Javier Bardem's performance brings out the internal conflict in Triton, showing us a ruler who's used to having power but feels powerless when it comes to connecting with his daughter. The eventual reconciliation between them feels more meaningful because we've seen both sides of their conflict. Ursula's motivations and backstory also get some additional context in this version. While it's not explored in great detail, there are hints that she was once part of Triton's court before being banished. This adds a layer of personal vendetta to her schemes against Ariel and Triton. She's not just evil for the sake of being evil. She wants revenge against Triton and sees corrupting his daughter as the perfect way to hurt him. Taking Ariel's voice and setting up the impossible contract isn't just about collecting another soul for her garden of poor, unfortunate souls. It's about getting leverage over Triton, which is exactly what happens when he trades himself for Ariel. Ursula's ultimate goal is to take over the ocean kingdom, using Triton's trident to become the most powerful being in the sea. Melissa McCarthy plays these layers of motivation well, showing that Ursula is calculating and patient, not just impulsively wicked. The character's showmanship and theatrical personality are a mask for someone who's been planning this revenge for a long time. The pacing of the film is something that's worth discussing because, at over 2 hours, it's significantly longer than the animated original. Some of this extended runtime is used to develop characters and relationships more fully, which generally works in the film's favor. However, there are definitely moments where the pacing drags a bit. The middle section, where Ariel is trying to win Eric's heart without her voice, could have been tighter. Some scenes feel repetitive, showing us Ariel struggling to communicate or experiencing human things that we've already established she's excited about. The film takes its time, which can be nice for character development, but sometimes feels like it's stretching to justify the longer runtime. The musical numbers are paced well, generally serving as both entertainment and plot progression. Under the Sea and Kiss the Girl are highlights that move at a good clip and advance the story. Some of the new songs feel a bit shoehorned in, added more to give certain characters their moment than because the story demanded them. Overall, the pacing works, but could have been tightened up in places. One interesting twist in this version is how the film handles the true love's kiss. While the story still requires Eric to kiss Ariel before sunset on the third day, there's more emphasis on them actually getting to know each other, rather than just physical attraction. The time they spend together shows them connecting over shared interests and perspectives. They don't just gaze longingly at each other. They have adventures, communicate despite Ariel's lack of voice, and learn about each other's worlds. This makes the romance feel more substantial, even if it's still happening pretty quickly by real-world standards. The film also plays with our expectations during the climax. When Ariel's voice returns and Eric realizes she's the one who saved him, we expect immediate resolution, but then the sun sets before they can kiss. This subverts the typical Disney ending for a moment and leads into the more action-oriented climax with Ursula. It's a small thing, but it shows the filmmakers trying to add some unpredictability to a story most viewers already know. The film's approach to the deal with Ursula adds some nuances that make Ariel's decision feel less foolish than it might otherwise. In this version, Ariel is clearly desperate after her fight with Triton, feeling like she has no other options. Ursula preys on this vulnerability, presenting herself as understanding and helpful. The terms of the deal are explained clearly, but Ursula uses manipulation and pressure to get Ariel to agree quickly, without really thinking it through. There's a moment where you can see Ariel hesitating, realizing this might be a bad idea, but Ursula pushes her to commit before she can reconsider. This makes Ariel seem less naive and more like someone making a rash decision in an emotional moment, which feels more realistic. The film also emphasizes that Ariel isn't just doing this for a boy. She genuinely wants to be part of the human world and sees this as her only chance. Eric is the catalyst, but the human world itself is equally important to her. This added context makes her choice feel more understandable, even if it's still clearly a mistake. The climactic battle with Ursula is expanded and made more spectacular for the live-action version. In the animated film, it's already pretty intense, but here it becomes a full-scale epic confrontation involving both Ariel and Eric fighting against the giant sea witch. Ursula uses Triton's trident to control the ocean, creating whirlpools and massive waves that threaten both the underwater kingdom and the surface world. The special effects here are impressive, creating a sense of chaos and danger. Ariel demonstrates bravery and resourcefulness, using her knowledge of both worlds to fight back. Eric's role in defeating Ursula is maintained from the original, with him steering a ship to impale her, but it's made more collaborative here. Both Ariel and Eric contribute to the victory, making it feel less like the prince saving the day and more like partners working together. The scale of the destruction shows why Ursula is such a serious threat and makes her defeat feel like a genuine triumph rather than just the inevitable ending. After Ursula's defeat, the resolution takes time to address the relationship between Ariel and Triton in a more satisfying way. Instead of just immediately transforming Ariel back to a human and sending her off, there's a conversation between father and daughter. Triton acknowledges that he was wrong to try to control Ariel and that she's shown she can make her own decisions. He's seen how she handled herself in the battle and how Eric fought for her, proving that not all humans are dangerous. This moment of understanding between them adds emotional depth to the ending. When Triton transforms Ariel permanently into a human, it's clearly a difficult decision for him. He's letting his daughter go, knowing he'll see her less often, but he's doing it because he loves her and wants her to be happy. The film suggests that Ariel won't completely abandon her family, showing that she can exist in both worlds and bridge the gap between them. This more nuanced ending addresses one of the criticisms of the original story, where Ariel essentially abandons her entire family and world for a guy she just met. The wedding scene that closes the film is kept brief but sweet, showing Ariel and Eric united with both their families present. There are merpeople and humans together, suggesting a new era of cooperation and understanding between the two kingdoms. It's a hopeful image that reinforces the film's themes about breaking down barriers and bringing different worlds together. Ariel's sisters are there, showing they support her choice even if they don't fully understand it. Triton attends, looking proud but bittersweet, capturing the complexity of watching your child start their own life. The final images show Ariel looking confident and happy, no longer torn between two worlds, but having found a way to embrace both parts of her identity. It's an ending that aims to satisfy the romantic fairy tale expectations while also providing more modern sensibilities about agency and family relationships. Whether it fully succeeds in that balance is probably a matter of personal taste, but the attempt is clear. Let's shift our focus to the technical aspects that bring this underwater world to life. The visual effects in this film are, without question, the most crucial element to making it work. Creating a believable underwater kingdom where merpeople and sea creatures can exist required cutting-edge CGI, and motion capture technology. The visual effects team, led by various vendors working on different aspects, faced the enormous challenge of making Ariel and the other merpeople look realistic when they're swimming and moving underwater. This meant not just creating convincing fish tails, but also ensuring hair, clothing, and bodies moved with the fluid physics of being submerged. The team studied countless hours of underwater footage to understand how light refracts through water, how particles float and drift, and how fabrics and hair behave. Every frame of underwater scenes required extensive rendering to add these details digitally, making what was shot on a soundstage look like it was filmed at the bottom of the ocean. The underwater kingdom of Atlantica is a visual feast, designed to feel both fantastical and somewhat grounded in reality. The architecture combines elements of coral reefs, classical ruins, and imaginative underwater formations that couldn't exist on land. The color palette is vibrant but not cartoonish, with blues, purples, and greens dominating the underwater scenes. The designers filled the environment with movement, adding schools of fish, floating plants, and particles that make the water feel alive. Triton's palace is grand and impressive, conveying his status as ruler of the ocean, while also feeling organic, like it grew from the sea itself, rather than being constructed. The attention to detail in these environments is remarkable, with different areas of the ocean having distinct looks and feels. The bright, colorful areas where Ariel lives contrast with the darker, more sinister environment around Ursula's lair. These visual distinctions help guide the viewer's emotional response to different locations. Lighting plays a crucial role in distinguishing the underwater scenes from the surface world and in setting the mood for different sequences. Underwater scenes have a diffused quality, with light filtering down from the surface and creating areas of brightness and shadow. The lighting team had to simulate how sunlight behaves when passing through water, creating that distinctive shimmering effect we associate with underwater environments. Different times of day are shown underwater, from bright afternoon scenes to darker evening moments, each requiring different lighting approaches. In Ursula's lair, the lighting becomes much more theatrical, with dramatic shadows and highlights that make her seem more menacing. When Ursula uses magic, there are bioluminescent effects and unnatural lights that signal danger. Above water, the lighting is more natural and straightforward, using the actual sun for daytime scenes and torches or candles for nighttime moments. This contrast helps viewers immediately know whether they're watching an underwater or surface scene. The use of color is both artistic and functional throughout the film. Underwater scenes lean heavily into blues and greens, as you'd expect, but the production designers made sure to include pops of vibrant color to keep things from becoming monotonous. Ariel's red hair is iconic and needed to stay vibrant even underwater, so the colorists made sure it remained a focal point in every scene she's in. The coral and plant life in Atlantica come in purples, oranges, reds, and yellows, creating visual interest and preventing the underwater world from feeling dull. Ursula's design incorporates purples and blacks, making her stand out as a threat whenever she appears. The surface world has a different color palette, with more natural earth tones, blue skies, and the golden light of sunrise and sunset. During the climactic battle, the colors become more chaotic, with unnatural purples and blacks spreading across the ocean as Ursula's power grows. The color work helps guide the viewer's emotions and keeps the visual experience engaging throughout the film's long runtime. The film runs approximately 135 minutes or 2 hours and 15 minutes, making it significantly longer than the 83-minute animated original. This extended runtime allows for more character development and additional scenes, but also means the film has to maintain audience engagement for much longer. For younger viewers, this length might test their patience, especially during the slower middle section. For viewers familiar with the original story, the extra time can feel unnecessary in places, padding out a narrative we already know. However, the additional runtime also allows for the expanded musical numbers and the more developed relationships between characters. The Under the Sea sequence, for instance, is significantly longer and more elaborate than in the animated version, which works as a spectacular showcase, but does extend the overall length. Whether the longer runtime is justified depends largely on what you want from this remake. If you're looking for a quick, breezy retelling, it might feel long. If you want a more immersive experience with more depth, the runtime allows for that. The film's release on Netflix is actually incorrect information, so let me clarify that. The Little Mermaid 2023 was released theatrically by Walt Disney Pictures in May 2023. It was not a Netflix production or exclusive. After its theatrical run, the film became available on Disney+, Disney's own streaming platform, where it joined their library of content. This is standard practice for Disney theatrical releases, which have an exclusive theatrical window before moving to home video and streaming. The confusion might come from the fact that many films these days do premiere on streaming services, and Netflix has been producing high-profile movies with major stars. However, Disney keeps its major releases like The Little Mermaid on its own platform rather than licensing them to competitors. The theatrical release was important for this film, given its massive budget and the spectacle of the underwater sequences, which were designed to be impressive on the big screen. The critical reception to The Little Mermaid was mixed, which seems to be the standard response to these Disney live-action remakes. Some critics praised the film for its visual spectacle, the performances of Halle Bailey and Melissa McCarthy, and the updated musical numbers. These positive reviews highlighted how the film successfully translated the animated classic's magic into live action while adding enough new elements to justify its existence. Critics who enjoyed the film often pointed to Bailey's luminous performance and stunning voice as the highlight, arguing that her take on Ariel brought new depth to the character. The production design and visual effects were frequently mentioned as impressive achievements, with reviewers noting how the underwater sequences managed to feel both realistic and fantastical. The musical numbers, especially Under the Sea, were often cited as highlights that captured the joy and energy of the original songs while adding visual flair that only modern effects could achieve. However, there were plenty of critics who found the film unnecessary and disappointing. Common criticisms included the overly long runtime, the uncanny valley effect of some of the CGI sea creatures, and the feeling that the remake didn't add enough new material to justify remaking a near-perfect animated film. Some reviewers felt that the photorealistic approach to the underwater creatures removed the expressiveness and charm of the animated versions, making characters like Sebastian and Flounder less appealing. The darker, more realistic color palette of some underwater scenes was criticized for lacking the vibrant, saturated colors of the animation. There were also critiques about the pacing, with several reviewers noting that the middle section dragged and could have been tightened considerably. Some felt that the attempts to modernize the story and give characters more agency didn't go far enough and felt half-hearted. The new songs, written by Lin-Manuel Miranda, received mixed reactions, with some finding them forgettable compared to the classic Alan Menken and Howard Ashman compositions. Audience reception was similarly divided, often along generational lines. Older viewers who grew up with the animated version seemed more critical, viewing the remake as inferior to the original and questioning why it needed to exist. Many in this group felt that the charm of the animation was lost in the translation to live action, and that the photorealistic approach removed the whimsy that made the original special. There were also, unfortunately, some audience members who had negative reactions based solely on the casting of a black actress as Ariel, revealing that racism still affects how some people respond to artistic choices. These bad faith criticisms overshadowed some of the legitimate artistic discussions about the film. Younger viewers, particularly children experiencing the story for the first time, generally responded more positively, enjoying the spectacle and music without the burden of comparison to the original. Parents reported that their kids were captivated by Halle Bailey's performance and loved seeing the underwater world brought to life. The film seemed to succeed at introducing Ariel's story to a new generation, even if it didn't win over everyone from previous generations. From a box office perspective, The Little Mermaid performed reasonably well, but didn't quite reach the heights of some other Disney remakes. It opened with decent numbers and showed staying power throughout its theatrical run, ultimately grossing over $550 million worldwide. This is a solid performance, but given the film's reported budget of around $250 million plus marketing costs, it wasn't the runaway hit that Disney might have hoped for. The film performed better domestically in the United States than it did in some international markets, where there was less nostalgia for the original and sometimes cultural resistance to the casting choices. For comparison, the 2019 live-action The Lion King grossed over $1.6 billion worldwide, and Beauty and the Beast from 2017 made over $1.2 billion. The Little Mermaid's more modest performance might influence Disney's approach to future remakes, though the company has shown no signs of slowing down its live-action adaptation strategy. The strengths of the film are clear even to those who might not love it overall. Halle Bailey's performance is universally acknowledged as a highlight, with her voice being particularly stunning. The girl can sing, and her rendition of Part of Your World is genuinely moving, conveying Ariel's longing and determination in a way that honors the original while making it her own. Her acting, especially in the scenes where she has no voice, shows real talent and presence. The production design and visual effects, while not perfect, represent an impressive technical achievement. The underwater sequences are immersive and beautiful, creating a world that feels both magical and believable. The musical numbers are generally well executed, particularly Under the Sea, which is a visual spectacle that justifies the live-action treatment. Melissa McCarthy brings menace and fun to Ursula, creating a villain who's entertaining to watch. The expanded character development for Eric And the more nuanced relationship between Ariel and Triton are genuine improvements over the original that add emotional depth. The weaknesses are equally apparent and have been discussed extensively since the film's release. The runtime is too long, with pacing issues that make parts of the film feel sluggish. Some of the CGI creatures fall into the uncanny valley, looking almost but not quite right in a way that's distracting. Sebastian and Flounder in particular suffer from being photorealistic fish who have to express human emotions, which is a difficult balance that isn't always successful. The attempts to modernize the story feel half-hearted in places, adding context and agency for characters without fully committing to updating the more problematic elements of the fairy tale. The film can't decide if it wants to be a faithful recreation of the animated classic or a reimagining for modern sensibilities, so it ends up being an awkward compromise. Some of the new songs are forgettable and feel inserted rather than organic to the story. The darker color palette, while more realistic, sometimes makes the underwater scenes feel murky and less visually appealing than the vibrant animation. The film plays it safe in many ways, unwilling to take the risks that might have made it truly special and distinct from the original. So, is the film worth watching? That depends entirely on what you're looking for and your relationship with the original. If you're a die-hard fan of the 1989 animated classic who believes it should never have been remade, you'll probably find this version disappointing and unnecessary. Your attachment to the original will make every change feel like a betrayal, and no amount of technical achievement will overcome that. If you're someone who enjoys these Disney live-action remakes and appreciates seeing how classic stories are reinterpreted with modern technology and perspectives, you'll likely find things to enjoy here. The spectacle of the underwater sequences and Halle Bailey's performance make it worthwhile, even if it's not perfect. If you have young children who aren't familiar with the original, this version will probably enchant them and serve as their introduction to Ariel's story, which is valuable in its own right. For viewers interested in the technical aspects of filmmaking, the visual effects work alone makes it worth studying. If you're looking for a fun, family-friendly musical with good performances and impressive visuals, The Little Mermaid delivers that, even with its flaws. It's not a masterpiece, but it's not a disaster either. It's a competent, occasionally inspired remake that justifies its existence through Halle Bailey's star-making performance and some genuinely spectacular sequences. The film works best when you can let go of comparisons to the original and judge it on its own merits as a piece of entertainment. The music is catchy, the romance is sweet, the villain is fun, and the message about following your dreams and bridging different worlds is positive. These are solid foundations for an enjoyable movie experience, even if the execution isn't flawless. For casual viewers looking for something to watch with the family, it's perfectly serviceable and will likely keep everyone entertained for its runtime. The film also serves as an important moment for representation in mainstream Hollywood filmmaking. Seeing a black actress play an iconic Disney princess means something to many viewers, particularly young black girls who haven't often seen themselves in these fairy tale roles. The backlash against Halle Bailey's casting revealed how much work still needs to be done in terms of accepting diverse casting in beloved roles, but it also showed how meaningful representation can be to those who have been excluded. Bailey handles the pressure of being at the center of these conversations with grace, letting her performance speak for itself. The film's existence with her in the lead role will be significant regardless of its artistic merits, showing that Disney princesses can look different than they have historically. This cultural impact is worth considering when evaluating whether the film succeeds in its goals. From a musical standpoint, the film succeeds in preserving the beloved songs from the original while updating their arrangements and presentation. Alan Menken returned to compose the score and oversee the classic songs, bringing his experience and ensuring continuity with the animated version. Part of Your World remains the emotional centerpiece, and Halle Bailey's rendition brings fresh interpretation while honoring Jodie Benson's iconic original performance. Under the Sea becomes a massive production number with elaborate choreography and visual effects, transforming it into a spectacle that takes full advantage of the live-action format. Kiss the Girl retains its romantic, dreamy quality, while being staged in a beautiful setting with practical and digital effects enhancing the atmosphere. Poor Unfortunate Souls allows Melissa McCarthy to showcase her theatrical side, with Ursula's lair providing an appropriately creepy setting for her villain song. The new songs by Lin-Manuel Miranda, including For the First Time and Wild Uncharted Waters, fit stylistically with the existing music, even if they don't quite reach the same memorable heights. The choreography and staging of the musical numbers show real thought and creativity. Under the Sea is particularly impressive, featuring dozens of different sea creatures, each doing their own thing, while Sebastian tries to convince Ariel that life under the ocean is better than anything above. The coordination required to make this sequence work, with live actors, CGI creatures, and practical effects all working together, is substantial. Kiss the Girl is more intimate and romantic, using the setting sun, floating lights, and gentle water movement to create a mood. The staging takes advantage of the live-action format in ways that animation couldn't, using depth of field and camera movement to enhance the emotional impact. The production numbers feel like they belong in a musical, rather than being awkwardly inserted, with characters breaking into song in ways that flow naturally from the storytelling. This is crucial for a musical to work, and the film generally succeeds in making the songs feel earned rather than obligatory. The costume design deserves recognition for the work done on both the mere characters and the human characters. Ariel's mermaid tail needed to be both beautiful and believable, which meant creating something that looked organic while also being visually striking. The iridescent scales and the way the tail moves and catches light show attention to detail. For the underwater characters, the costumes had to work with the CGI tails and look appropriate for beings who live in the ocean. Triton's armor and crown convey his status while looking like they could exist underwater. Ursula's design is theatrical and dramatic, with her tentacles being both her costume and her character. Above water, the costumes reflect a somewhat timeless fairy tale aesthetic that doesn't tie the story to a specific era. Eric's wardrobe is princely but practical, suitable for someone who spends a lot of time on ships. Ariel's human outfits show her adjusting to surface life while maintaining her personality. The attention to costume details helps sell both the fantasy elements and the more grounded human world. The sound design and mixing face unique challenges in a film that splits its time between underwater and surface environments. Underwater scenes needed to sound different from surface scenes, with voices and music having a slightly muffled, echoing quality that suggests being submerged. However, this had to be balanced against the need for dialogue to be clear and music to be impactful. The sound team found a middle ground where the underwater scenes feel sonically distinct without sacrificing clarity. The ocean itself becomes a character through sound, with the constant presence of water movement, bubbles, and marine life creating an immersive audio environment. Above water, the sound design shifts to include wind, waves against the shore, and the creaking of ships, grounding those scenes in a different reality. During the climactic battle, the sound design becomes chaotic and overwhelming, with crashing waves, thunder, and Ursula's power, creating an assault on the senses that enhances the danger. The musical numbers required particularly careful mixing to ensure the songs came through clearly, while maintaining the environmental sounds that keep us grounded in the world. The editing of the film plays a crucial role in pacing and emotional impact, though it's not always successful in maintaining momentum. The underwater sequences required careful editing to ensure viewers could follow the action and geography despite the three-dimensional space and fluid movement. The editor had to balance showing off the impressive visual effects with keeping the story moving forward. Some sequences, like Under the Sea, use rapid cutting to showcase all the different sea creatures and activities, creating energy and excitement. Other moments, like Ariel exploring the sunken ship or gazing at the surface, use longer takes to let the audience absorb the wonder and beauty. The editing in the romance scenes between Ariel and Eric generally works well, using visual storytelling to convey their growing connection without relying on dialogue. However, the overall pacing issues suggest that more aggressive editing might have helped, particularly in the middle section where the film tends to meander. Some scenes could have been trimmed or cut entirely without losing anything essential to the story. The film's score, composed by Alan Menken, provides continuity with the original, while also expanding the musical landscape for a longer live-action film. Menken incorporates themes and melodies from the animated version, giving longtime fans moments of recognition and nostalgia. Ariel's theme, introduced in Part of Your World, recurs throughout the score, reminding us of her dreams and determination. The score shifts in tone and instrumentation between the underwater and surface worlds, helping to distinguish these environments sonically. Triton's theme has a regal, powerful quality that conveys his authority and later his emotional vulnerability. Ursula's musical motifs are appropriately sinister, with minor keys and unsettling harmonies that signal danger. The romantic themes for Ariel and Eric are sweeping and emotional without being overly saccharine. During action sequences, the score builds tension and excitement, supporting the visual chaos on screen. Menken's experience with both the original film and Broadway musicals serves him well, creating a score that enhances the emotional journey while also working as standalone music. The film's approach to the fairy tale source material tries to maintain the romance and magic while addressing some modern sensibilities. The story still centers on a young woman changing herself for a man, which is problematic to many contemporary viewers. The film attempts to address this by emphasizing Ariel's fascination with the human world independent of Eric, showing that she's been collecting human artifacts and dreaming of the surface long before she met him. Eric becomes the catalyst for her actually pursuing that dream rather than the sole reason for it. The film also tries to make Ariel more active in her own story, having her fight alongside Eric in the climax, rather than being a damsel to be rescued. These changes are steps in the right direction, but don't fully resolve the underlying issues with the story's premise. The age of the characters is also somewhat uncomfortable, with Ariel being 16 in the source material and making life-altering decisions based on a brief encounter. The film doesn't really address this beyond aging up the actors slightly, leaving the story's more questionable elements intact. The theme of parental control versus independence is explored more thoroughly in this version than in the original. Triton's overprotectiveness is given more context and nuance, making him a more sympathetic character even when he's wrong. The film shows how his fear, stemming from past tragedy, manifests as controlling behavior that pushes Ariel away rather than protecting her. This is a dynamic many viewers can relate to, making the conflict feel more grounded despite the fantastical setting. Ariel's desire for independence and to make her own choices, even if they're mistakes, is portrayed as valid and important. The resolution comes when Triton recognizes that Ariel is her own person and must be allowed to live her own life, even if it means leaving his kingdom. This theme of letting go and trusting your children to make their own path is universal and gives the story emotional resonance beyond the romance plot. The film also explores themes of belonging and identity, with Ariel caught between two worlds and not fully fitting into either. As a mermaid, she's different from her sisters, more curious about the forbidden human world than content with underwater life. When she becomes human, she's still an outsider trying to navigate an unfamiliar culture without even the ability to speak. This sense of not quite belonging anywhere is something many people experience, particularly those from multicultural backgrounds or who feel different from their communities. Ariel's journey is about finding where she belongs and creating a life that honors both parts of her identity rather than choosing one over the other. The ending suggests she doesn't have to completely abandon her mermaid heritage to be human. She can bridge both worlds. This theme of integration rather than assimilation adds depth to what could otherwise be a simple fish-out-of-water story. The environmental subtext present in the original is maintained here, with the conflict between the ocean kingdom and the human world representing broader tensions between nature and human development. Triton's fear of humans is based on their history of taking from the ocean without respect or understanding. This resonates with contemporary concerns about ocean pollution, overfishing, and climate change affecting marine ecosystems. The film doesn't beat viewers over the head with this message, but it's there in the background, adding relevance to the fairy tale. The resolution, where humans and merpeople begin to understand and cooperate with each other, suggests hope for better relationships between humanity and the natural world. It's a gentle environmental message wrapped in a love story, appropriate for a family film. The technical achievement of creating a believable underwater world in live action cannot be understated. Previous attempts at underwater fantasy in films have often looked fake or required actual underwater filming that limited what could be shown. This film uses a combination of dry for wet filming techniques, where actors perform on sound stages with effects added later, and sophisticated CGI to create the illusion of being underwater. The hair and costume simulation alone required enormous computing power and artistic skill to make fabrics and hair move as they would when submerged. The lighting had to simulate how sunlight filters through water and reflects off surfaces. Every frame of the underwater scenes required multiple layers of effects work to add environmental details, creatures, and the subtle movements that make water feel present, even though the actors are surrounded by air. The visual effects teams spent years developing techniques and technology to make this world believable, building on previous underwater VFX work while pushing the boundaries further. The decision to make the sea creatures photorealistic rather than stylized like in the animation was controversial and remains one of the most debated aspects of the film. On one hand, photorealistic creatures fit better with the live-action human actors and the realistic underwater environments, creating visual consistency. On the other hand, realistic fish and crabs have limited facial expressiveness, making it harder to convey the emotions and personality that the animated versions communicated so effectively. Sebastian, in particular, suffers from this choice. A realistic crab simply cannot make the exaggerated expressions that an animated one can. The visual effects artists did their best to add subtle movements and expressions while keeping the creatures looking like they could exist in reality, but it's a difficult balance. Some viewers can accept the more limited expressiveness as a trade-off for the overall realistic aesthetic, while others find the realistic creatures creepy or soulless. This debate gets at a fundamental question about these remakes. Should they try to recreate the animation's expressiveness in live action, or should they commit fully to realism even if it changes the character's appeal? The film's approach to diversity and inclusion extends beyond just the casting of Halle Bailey as Ariel. The mermaids of Atlantica are portrayed by actresses of various ethnicities, creating an underwater kingdom that looks diverse rather than homogeneous. This makes sense given that the ocean is vast and would logically have many different populations. Eric's kingdom also shows diversity in its population, reflecting a more realistic and inclusive vision of these fantasy worlds. These choices help the film feel more contemporary and allow more children to see themselves reflected in the story. However, some critics noted that while the diversity in casting is positive, the story itself still follows very traditional fairy tale patterns that don't challenge conventional narratives beyond the surface level. The film represents progress in terms of who gets to tell these stories and be centered in them, even if the stories themselves remain relatively conservative in structure. For parents considering whether to show this film to their children, there are a few things to keep in mind. The runtime is long for younger kids, so be prepared for potential restlessness during the slower sections. The film is rated PG, and there's nothing particularly scary beyond Ursula being a villain and the climactic battle being intense. The sea witch might frighten very young or sensitive children, especially during her transformation scenes and when she's in her giant form. The themes of following your dreams and being true to yourself are positive messages for kids. The romance is innocent and sweet, appropriate for family viewing. The musical numbers will likely appeal to children who enjoy music and singing. The underwater scenes are visually engaging and full of colorful creatures that will capture kids' attention. Overall, it's suitable family entertainment that can spark conversations about dreams, identity, and understanding between different groups. Comparing this film to other Disney live-action remakes shows both the successes and limitations of the format. Beauty and the Beast was more faithful to its source material and featured more practical sets and costumes alongside the CGI. The Lion King was so photorealistic that it essentially became a nature documentary with famous voices, losing much of the original's emotional expressiveness. Aladdin took more liberties with the story and characters, updating them significantly for modern audiences. The Little Mermaid falls somewhere in the middle, making some updates and changes while remaining largely faithful to the animated version. The use of CGI is extensive, but not quite as overwhelming as in The Lion King. The performances are strong, particularly the lead, which wasn't always the case in other remakes. The musical elements are preserved and celebrated rather than minimized. Among the Disney remakes, The Little Mermaid is somewhere in the middle tier. Not the best, but far from the worst. A solid, if unexceptional, addition to the collection. The future of Disney's remake strategy may be influenced by how films like The Little Mermaid perform and are received. The diminishing returns both critically and commercially suggest that audiences might be reaching a saturation point with these projects. There's only so many times you can redo the same stories before people start asking for something new instead. However, Disney has shown no signs of slowing down, with remakes of Snow White, Moana, and others in various stages of development. The company clearly sees value in reintroducing these classic stories to new generations and leveraging the nostalgia of older viewers, even if the results are mixed. The technical achievements of films like The Little Mermaid at least show that the filmmakers are trying to do something visually interesting rather than just lazily recreating the animation frame by frame. Whether audiences will continue to show up for these remakes remains to be seen. The cultural conversation around The Little Mermaid extended far beyond normal film discourse due to the racist backlash against Halle Bailey's casting. Before the film was even released, there were bad faith campaigns to review bomb it and complaints about a fictional mermaid skin color. This revealed uncomfortable truths about how some segments of the population respond to diversity in media they consider theirs. It also showed how representation matters, as videos of young black girls reacting with joy to seeing a Disney princess who looked like them went viral. The film became a cultural battleground completely separate from its actual quality, which is unfortunate but revealing. The fact that a family musical about a singing mermaid became controversial shows how much work remains in terms of normalizing diversity in mainstream entertainment. The film's box office success, despite this backlash, sent an important message that inclusive casting is both morally right and commercially viable. Looking at The Little Mermaid from a storytelling perspective, it raises questions about the necessity of remakes versus original stories. Disney has incredible resources, talented filmmakers, and access to the best technology in the industry. One has to wonder what they could create if those resources were directed toward new stories rather than retreading the same ground. The argument for remakes is that they introduce classic stories to new generations who might not watch older animated films, and there's some validity to that. Children today are being raised on these live-action versions and connecting with them in ways that are genuine and meaningful, regardless of what older fans think. However, there's also value in original storytelling that takes risks and creates new characters and worlds rather than recycling existing ones. The remake trend speaks to a broader risk aversion in Hollywood, where studios prefer proven IP over untested ideas. This is understandable from a business perspective, but potentially limiting creatively. The legacy of The Little Mermaid, 2023, will likely be tied more to Halle Bailey's star-making performance and the representation conversations than to the film itself as a piece of cinema. In 10 or 20 years, people might not remember specific scenes or songs from this version, but they'll remember it as the time a black actress played Ariel and what that meant. Bailey will hopefully have a long and successful career, and this film will be remembered as her introduction to mainstream audiences. The technical achievements will be footnotes, surpassed by whatever new technology comes along. The film itself will probably be regarded as a decent but unnecessary remake that served its purpose of entertaining a new generation while sparking important conversations about representation. It's unlikely to be considered a classic like the original animated film, but it doesn't need to be. It can exist as its own thing, serving its own purpose for its own audience. In conclusion, The Little Mermaid, 2023, is a big, ambitious, technically impressive film that succeeds more often than it fails. It's not perfect, with pacing issues, CGI that doesn't always work, and an unnecessary length that tests patience. However, it features a genuinely great performance from Halle Bailey, impressive visual spectacle in the underwater sequences, and enough charm and heart to work as family entertainment. Whether you'll enjoy it depends largely on your expectations and your relationship with the original. If you can approach it as its own thing rather than a replacement for the animated classic, you'll likely find things to appreciate. The film represents both the promise and the limitations of Disney's remake strategy, showing what's possible with modern technology while also raising questions about whether these projects are artistically necessary. For families looking for a musical adventure with positive messages and a talented cast, it delivers. For critics seeking innovation and risk-taking, it falls short. Ultimately, The Little Mermaid is a competent, occasionally inspired remake that will entertain many viewers while leaving others wondering what might have been if the same resources had been devoted to something new. It's a film that exists in the middle ground, good enough to justify its existence, but not exceptional enough to silence those who question whether it needed to exist at all. The broader implications of this remake trend deserve some examination, especially when we look at what it means for Disney's animation legacy. The original 1989 animated The Little Mermaid wasn't just another cartoon. It literally saved Disney animation from potential extinction. The studio had been struggling throughout the 1980s with films that weren't connecting with audiences, and The Little Mermaid changed everything. It kicked off the Disney Renaissance, proving that animated musicals still had a place in modern cinema and paving the way for classics like Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and The Lion King. So when Disney decides to remake these films in live action, there's something bittersweet about it. On one hand, it shows how enduring and beloved these stories are. On the other hand, It kind of feels like the studio is saying that animation isn't good enough anymore, that these stories only matter if they're done in live action with real actors. That's a weird message to send, especially from a company that built its empire on animation. The animated medium has unique strengths that live action simply cannot replicate. No matter how good the CGI becomes, animation allows for exaggeration, stylization, and visual creativity that would look ridiculous or uncanny if attempted in a realistic setting. Think about the original animated Ariel's expressions, the way her eyes could be impossibly large to convey wonder and emotion, or how Sebastian could scrunch his face in ways a real crab never could. The animated Under the Sea number had an energy and whimsy that came from not being bound by physics or reality. Fish could play instruments, octopuses could dance, and the whole ocean could become a synchronized musical celebration. The live-action version tries to recreate this, and while it's visually impressive, there's something lost in the translation to photorealism. The creatures look beautiful, but can't be as expressive or playful because they're constrained by looking like actual animals. This isn't a failing of the filmmakers, it's just a fundamental limitation of the approach they chose. What's interesting is how younger audiences don't necessarily have this same attachment to animation as the primary or superior format. Kids growing up now are surrounded by CGI and live-action superhero films, and to them, a live-action Little Mermaid isn't inherently less legitimate than an animated one. They don't carry the baggage of comparison or the reverence for the original that older viewers do. For them, Halle Bailey is Ariel, just as much as the animated version is for people who grew up in the late 80s and 90s. This generational difference in perspective is important to acknowledge when discussing these remakes. What feels like unnecessary retreading to one generation is a fresh, exciting experience for another. Both perspectives are valid, and maybe that's the point. These remakes aren't really for the people who loved the originals. They're for a new audience, while giving older viewers a chance to share something with their kids. The economic reality of these remakes is straightforward. They make money, usually quite a lot of it. Even when they're not critical darlings, even when longtime fans complain, these films tend to perform well at the box office. The Lion King remake made over $1.6 billion, despite being essentially a shot-for-shot recreation with realistic animals. Beauty and the Beast was hugely profitable. Aladdin exceeded expectations. From Disney's corporate perspective, these remakes are relatively safe investments. They have built-in name recognition, proven stories, and marketability across multiple demographics. Original films are riskier. They require building awareness from scratch, and there's no guarantee audiences will connect with new characters and worlds. So while film fans might yearn for more original content, the financial incentives push studios toward familiar IP. The Little Mermaid, 2023, even with its mixed reception and moderate box office compared to some other remakes, still represents a profitable venture for Disney when you factor in merchandising, streaming, and home video sales. Let's talk about the merchandise and marketing around this film, because that's a huge part of Disney's strategy. Before the film even released, stores were flooded with Little Mermaid products: dolls, costumes, accessories, home goods, and more. The marketing campaign was extensive, with trailers, TV spots, promotional partnerships, and media appearances by the cast. Disney knows how to sell a movie, and they pulled out all the stops for this one. The Ariel doll featuring Halle Bailey's likeness became a sought-after item, with many parents reporting that their daughters were excited to have a doll that looked more like them. This represents real change in how Disney markets its princesses, moving toward more diverse representation in merchandise as well as on screen. The soundtrack was heavily promoted, with singles released ahead of the film to build anticipation. The Part of Your World clip that was released early went viral, largely due to Halle Bailey's stunning vocals, generating significant buzz for the film. The marketing did face challenges, particularly the aforementioned racist backlash against the casting. Disney largely handled this by ignoring the bad faith criticism and focusing on positive messaging and the film's actual qualities. They positioned the movie as a celebration of a beloved story with a fresh take, emphasizing Bailey's talent and the visual spectacle of the underwater world. The strategy was to let the film speak for itself, rather than engaging with trolls, which was probably the right call. When the positive reviews and audience reactions started coming in, particularly from parents sharing their children's excited reactions, the marketing shifted to highlighting these authentic responses. The videos of young black girls seeing themselves as a Disney princess for the first time became some of the most powerful marketing the film could have asked for, more impactful than any traditional advertisement. Now, if we're being totally honest, one has to wonder about the creative fulfillment for the people working on these remakes. Imagine being a talented director, cinematographer, or effects artist, and you're spending years of your life recreating scenes and songs that already exist in a near-perfect form. Sure, you can add your own touches and interpretations, but you're fundamentally constrained by audience expectations and the need to hit certain iconic moments. Is that creatively satisfying? For some artists, probably yes. There's a challenge in adapting beloved material and making it work in a new format. For others, it might feel limiting compared to building something entirely new. Rob Marshall and his team clearly approached this project with passion and dedication, trying to honor the original while also leaving their own mark. Whether they fully succeeded is debatable, but the effort is evident in the craft on display. The voice actors from the original animated film had their own complicated relationship with this remake. Jodie Benson, who voiced Ariel in 1989 and became synonymous with the character, was gracious and supportive of Halle Bailey, even making a cameo appearance in the live-action version. This kind of passing of the torch was classy and helped bridge the gap between the two versions. Other original voice actors have had various reactions to their films being remade, from enthusiastic support to polite distance. It must be strange to see a character you brought to life being reinterpreted by someone else, especially when your version is so beloved. The fact that most of the original voice actors have been supportive of the remakes speaks to their professionalism and understanding that these new versions introduce the stories to new audiences rather than erasing the originals. The music industry impact of these remakes is also worth noting. The soundtracks often perform well commercially, introducing classic Disney songs to new listeners while giving established artists chances to record new versions. Halle Bailey's versions of the Little Mermaid songs charted and streamed millions of times, introducing her as a solo artist separate from her work with her sister in Chloe x Halle. The new songs, while not as instantly memorable as the classics, still add to the Disney music catalog. Lin-Manuel Miranda's involvement brought attention from his substantial fan base, many of whom might not otherwise have paid attention to a Disney remake. The interplay between film and music industries benefits both, with the movie promoting the soundtrack and the songs building anticipation for the film. Disney is particularly skilled at this synergy, having built much of their brand on memorable music. Something that doesn't get discussed enough is the international aspect of these remakes and how they play in different markets. The Little Mermaid performed better in North America than in many international territories, which is a pattern we've seen with some other Disney remakes featuring diverse casts. This reflects both different levels of familiarity with the original properties and, unfortunately, different attitudes toward diversity in cast. Some international markets are more conservative about changing the appearance of established characters, while others simply don't have the same nostalgic connection to the Disney Renaissance films. The film industry is global now, and studios have to consider how their products will play worldwide, not just in the United States. This sometimes creates tension between doing what's right creatively and what makes financial sense internationally. Disney seems to be prioritizing domestic audiences and long-term brand values over short-term international box office in some cases, which is probably the right approach even if it impacts overall grosses. The home video and streaming era has changed how we think about these films' success and longevity. A movie that has a modest theatrical run can find a second life on streaming platforms, being discovered by viewers who didn't see it in theaters. The Little Mermaid will likely be watched by millions more people on Disney Plus than ever saw it in cinemas, especially as time goes on and new subscribers discover it. The film becomes part of Disney's vast content library, always available for family movie nights or kids discovering Disney princesses for the first time. In this context, the theatrical box office is almost like an expensive marketing campaign for the streaming release. Disney Plus needs content to justify subscriptions, and these big-budget remakes serve that purpose while also having the potential for theatrical profits. It's a different business model than existed even a decade ago, and it changes how we evaluate a film's success. The technical crew on this film deserves recognition for solving problems that hadn't really been solved before, at least not at this scale. Making an entire underwater kingdom look believable in live action required innovation across multiple departments. The hair simulation team had to create systems that would make Ariel's long red hair move naturally underwater while still being visually striking and not covering her face during important moments. That's harder than it sounds when you're dealing with thousands of individual hair strands that all need to behave according to underwater physics. The costume team had to design outfits that would look good both in the reference footage shot on set and after all the effects were added to make it look underwater. The lighting team had to plan for how their practical lighting would be modified in post-production to simulate sunlight filtering through water. Every department had to work in service of this elaborate illusion, and the fact that it works as well as it does is a testament to their skill and coordination. Let's address the elephant in the room, or should I say, the flounder in the ocean, The absolute weirdness of photorealistic talking fish. This is where the remake really shows the limitations of its approach. In animation, you accept that fish can talk and have personalities because everything is stylized and exists in a cartoon world. When you make Sebastian, Flounder, and Scuttle look like actual animals from nature documentaries, but they're still talking and singing, there's a cognitive dissonance that's hard to overcome. It's the same issue the Lion King remake had, where realistic lions having conversations about responsibility and destiny feels fundamentally wrong, because realistic lions don't do that. The filmmakers were stuck between two bad options: make the animals more cartoonish and break the realistic aesthetic, or make them realistic and lose expressiveness. They chose realism and did their best to work within those constraints, but it's an uphill battle. Some viewers can overlook this uncanny quality, while others find it distracting enough to take them out of the movie entirely. The reaction videos that flooded social media when the film was released tell an interesting story about its cultural impact. On one side, you had videos of young black girls absolutely losing their minds with joy seeing Ariel look like them, crying and saying, "She's like me." These videos went viral and showed the genuine importance of representation to children who've rarely seen themselves in these princess roles. On the other side, you had grown adults having meltdowns about a fictional mermaid's appearance, revealing more about their own issues than about the film. The contrast between children's pure joy and adults' anger was stark and telling. It showed that while representation battles can be exhausting and bring out the worst in some people, they matter tremendously to those who've been excluded. Those little girls seeing themselves